Have you ever had a turning point in your life? A moment when something inside you shifted, and then you knew things would never be the same. Sometimes these moments are really big and they're obvious, like changing to a new job, moving to an unfamiliar town, graduating from middle school to high school and on to college. It's a graduation of some kind. The birth of your first child or grandchild or niece and nephew. Or the death of someone close to you. Those are big moments. Other times, they're a little bit quieter, like realizing you've been walking in the wrong direction, like we did this morning. Hearing something in a song lyric that you've heard maybe 100 times or more that suddenly jumps out at you in a new way. Or maybe it's feeling God's tug to action as you are looking across a beautiful landscape. Perhaps looking out on the horizon and seeing the gorgeous reds and yellows and oranges of the sunset that God has made that day. 3 years ago, actually I wrote 3 years ago, but it was more like 6 years ago. What year is it? This is 2025. 9 years ago. I need to make a turnaround in my head. 9 years ago, I had one of these turning points. I went on my first international mission trip. Our team headed to Nicaragua, a town called Esteli. And while I was there in the town with our host missionaries, the folks who are on the ground doing their thing in Esteli and in the neighboring areas of Esteli every single day, following God's call, I hung out with the children, I hung out with the families, and I did the work. And something shifted for me. Something shifted in my heart, in my brain, in my thoughts pattern, and eventually in my path in life. I returned home after that trip, and I was changed. Though I didn't quite have it figured out yet, it was a very confusing time for me. The following week, I met up with my pastor to talk about how I was processing all of this information, this experience. And during that conversation, he looked at me and he said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a pastor? About having your own flock?" And of course, I laughed and came up with as many reasons as I could as to why this was a bad idea. I definitely was resisting. But the question stuck with me. It nagged at me. It pulled at me. It tugged at me. And I found myself visiting a seminary, and then the rest of that story brings me here. The question landed hard. It landed deep. It's kind of like God had just pulled a chair up in our conversation and looked at me and said, "I'm calling you to do something different with your life." Like Moses at the burning bush, I wanted to say, Who? Me? I left that meeting with my heart racing. I was both scared and I was curious. And that was the moment that everything for me turned. I tried to dodge the question, but that question became a seed of a call I could not ignore. God met me on the road, in the buses, in the work, in the people, in the children, in the songs of Esteli, Nicaragua. And now that same God was nudging me towards something new, something I'd never imagined for myself. I didn't fully understand it. I was confused. I was scared. And yet I started walking. Because we don't often anticipate, or we can't anticipate, points in our lives that will be a change. Like Moses before the burning bush, we don't always feel ready. And like Mary and Joseph, so Advent is coming around the corner, believe it or not, it's going to be here soon. Mary and Joseph were visited by angels, and they wondered, why on earth is this happening to us? We question God, asking, where are you? Where are you in this? And where the heck are we headed? Where are we going? But that's the way that turning points usually work. God meets the ordinary, like you and me, in ordinary places, in unexpected ways, and says, go, trust, and do not be afraid. Today's story from Luke's Gospel is full of those same twists and turns. It begins with Jesus walking along, just doing his thing. When 10 people with leprosy call out from across the way and say, Master, Jesus, have mercy on us. This call out is one of the simplest and truest prayers there is. Jesus, have mercy on me. We're not asking for God to fix everything, but rather asking for God to see us and have mercy on us in our current state, wherever we are and however we are. And though Jesus does not heal these guys on the spot, he does see them. And he tells them to go and show themselves to the priests. So still sick, still not healed, probably confused as to these instructions, they started to walk. And it's then, and only then, in that moment, that point of turning, as they were walking away from the one who was supposed to be the healer, that we hear that they were healed. The miracle meets them right there on the road. It's as if Jesus is saying to them, start walking in your faith, even before you see the change. It's how faith works sometimes. The healing and the strength and the courage often only come after we go. It was true for Moses, who only found his voice after stepping toward Pharaoh. It was true for Mary and Joseph, who said yes to God without knowing how this thing would unfold. And then Luke's story doesn't stop there with the healing of the 10. When we read later that one of them stopped in his tracks, realizing what had just happened to him, and he turns back to Jesus. He falls at Jesus' feet, and in this text it says he prostrated himself, which is he is on his belly, arms and legs out in the most vulnerable of positions. And then he says to this one, get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well. See, the other 9 were cured of their disease, but this man was changed in a deeper way. His gratitude had prompted him to turn and go back to Jesus and say thank you, to be in conversation with the one who had saved him. And in turn, he is not only healed, but he is made whole. That's the real turning point in our story. Healing began when the 10 followed Jesus' instructions to walk down the road, but wholeness came when the one turned back to to Jesus. And that's what turning points do for us, too. They change our direction. They remind us that we need to pause, and in the pause, notice, and in the noticing, giving thanks to God for the things that we notice. And maybe you've had one of these turning points in your life. I think most of us have had these if we think back through our history. Ones that jump off the page and others we have to really click through a little bit to find. Conversation we might have had, decisions we might have made, mission trips we might have gone on, school trips we might have gone on when we were young or we are still young. A death, a birth, a prayer that shifted your heart. And maybe it was in a small moment when you were by yourself, sitting in a waiting room of a hospital, alone at your kitchen table, in your room with your books open and the light on. And you felt that tug inside you. The sense that God was calling you towards something new, even when you tried to push it away. You might have heard that small voice saying, "This is the way. Let's go for a walk." Maybe today is your turning point. Maybe it's in this moment that you stop long enough to see what God is already doing in your life. And when you do, remember this, that God's calling doesn't require perfection. It only waits for a willing heart. It waits for the moment that we pause long enough to listen, to turn, and to say, "Here I am. Let's start walking." Amen.